And what I find for these people, in my experience, is that many times there's a choice that needs to be made. Like there's a decision that they have to make that they've been unwilling to make for whatever reason. And I like to remind myself and to remind others that most times I've found to be true that your path forward won't be revealed until you make a decision about your current situation. So we can manifest all we want, we can make vision boards all we want, we can do 5-year plans all we want, and if you are unwilling to make a decision about the current situation you are in, all of that's going to be stymied. And I know that firsthand, and it's scary to make decisions, right? Because then who are we going to be when we make that decision about changing careers? When we make that decision about a shift needs to happen in this relationship, or maybe I'm going to have to go another direction. When we make that decision that we're going to establish boundaries with family members or friends that previously were crossed, when we make that decision, we're going to invest in ourselves in a way that we've never invested in ourselves before, et cetera. Then what? I mean, it's scary because you, like, to your point, as you mentioned earlier, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. However, the cool thing is that you are in the game.
I love that. You are in the game. We lose sight of that because we're so future oriented in our minds in that moment that it's hard to remember that you're still in the game. Hey, Thrivers, this is Sharon Land with Thrive with Sharon podcast. And once again, we are here with another incredible guest. And today I have Antonio Neves, who has turned out to be somebody that I have enjoyed getting to know over the past couple of months. And we've had some incredible conversations. And he is an author, an internationally recognized speaker, a podcast host, an award-winning broadcast journalist, and an in-demand success coach. And that's just what he's doing now. That actually has nothing to do with some of the legacy material that he has done. But one of the things that I have just completely resonated with is his book, which is Stop Living on Autopilot. And it is so incredible. You can see how many bookmarks I have and whatever. So Antonio, I want to welcome you to the show and thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much. You just reminded me about the chapters that we can live in life that I forget about, that we all forget about, all these different chapters. So it makes me smile a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, isn't it funny to revisit your work?
It's ridiculous in a good way, right? I was writing a newsletter today and I was referencing Disney World. And at this moment when I was like, oh, I used to work at Disney World years ago. And I forgot about this small slice of my life and what I learned from that and the joy I experienced from that and how that catapulted me to different places, et cetera. So yeah, it's fun to be reminded of the good, sometimes the challenging, et cetera.
My gosh. Yeah. Yeah, the good and the challenging. I think that comes hand in hand, right?
It does. I mean, the challenging, like we like to skip the challenging, but as you know, sometimes the challenging is where the magic tends to happen. I wrote something, I've been writing a lot. I have a lot more time at home these days than I normally do. And I've been writing a lot, and I wrote something that really connected with people. And I wrote something to the extent of, you can appreciate something even if you don't enjoy it, right? There's always this profound lesson in appreciating something, the experience, what you learned from it, even if in the midst of doing it, you don't enjoy it. I can't say that I always enjoy working out at the gym. I can't say I always enjoy eating healthy. I can't say I always enjoy going to bed early. Well, I actually do enjoy going to bed early. But yeah, there's some adultness in all of that, right? That it doesn't have to be all rainbows all the time for you to see the value in it.
Yeah, I agree. There's a sweetness in some of the things that help us to expand. But in my mind, when I hear you talking, it's like for every expansion, there has to be a contraction, right?
Mm.
So when we expand into something, it could feel like a contraction. And so it's that mental mindset that we have to have in order to really realize in that moment, in that present moment, where we are, who we are, and what potentially opportunities might come for us. And one of the things that I loved about your book, kind of a perfect segue into it, is you, in the very, very beginning, you say, list the 5 best things, some of the 5 best things that have happened to you or that you've been part of in your life. And, we often don't think about those things.
We rarely think about the 5 best things. In the book, I juxtapose it. So first I tell folks to, hey, write down the 5 best things to happen to you. And I leave it at that. And typically when I do that exercise, whether it's with a client, whether it's with a big group workshop, et cetera, you get the traditional stuff, graduating from college, getting married, having kids, buying a home, all this cool stuff, right? But I feel like that's kind of like the American dream kind of stuff, the consumerism type of stuff. But then what I do in the second part is say, hey, tell me the 5 best things that happened to you that wouldn't necessarily appear on a resume or a bio, that wouldn't show up in a Google search. Those 5 things that are non-traditional. And people are stuck when they have to do that, when they can't name the traditional stuff. It's like telling someone to introduce themselves without referencing their career, right? Their
Right.
identity is tied to these key things. But like I mentioned earlier, like one of the 5 best things that happened to me was that internship at Disney, because I was a small town kid from Michigan. And that was my first time leaving the state of Michigan and realizing that, oh, wow, this is a big country. Oh, wow, there are people who live from all across the world. Wow, I can study abroad. Yeah, but that wouldn't necessarily appear on my resume. And there are other great things. Studying abroad, some of the 5 best things. Leaving the television industry behind to do leadership and development work, one of the best things. So for folks listening right now, think about the 5 best things that happen to you that are not traditional, not getting married, not having kids, not buying a house, and see what comes up for you. And I'm rambling, but typically in my experience, sometimes those best things, there are moments in our lives when we were bold, when we were courageous in some capacity. Doesn't necessarily mean that things worked out our way, but we were we were alive in those
Yeah.
moments. We were participating.
Yes. Yeah. We were bold. I love that statement because many times, at least in my experience, is that when we choose to be bold, we want this almost certainty that when we take that jump, we take that risk, we take that leap, that something great is going to be tangible on the other side. And that doesn't happen. And that's, again, referencing back to your book, but also just referencing a lot of the conversations that we've had, which is just like really taking a look at the nuanced things, right? All of these nuances of, sometimes it's bold to, when everyone's going right, to go left with no idea what's going to befall you other than the fact that you feel like it's important for you to go left, right? And you mentioned leaving the television industry, been something that a lot of people had some opinions on.
Oh, 100%. But even first, before we talk about the television industry, I think it's important, in a lot of the work that I do as a coach, I talk a lot about lead measures and lag measures. Unfortunately, in society, we spend a lot of time on lag measures. Lag measures are the end results. That's losing 30 pounds. That's making X amount of dollars. That's getting a certain job title, et cetera. That's the lag measure. What we don't focus enough on is the lead measures, the actions day to day that lead to that end result. So what leads to that weight loss? What leads to that promotion? What leads to that income? And I find that when we focus on what we need to do today, as opposed to what that end result's going to be, we change. We just become a person that shows up. We become a person that has standards, that has certain types of values of how we show up in this life. It's when someone says, "Are you working out today?" You look at them like they're crazy. You're like, me not working out is the exception. It's not, you don't have to ask me if I'm working out. I'm a kind of person who works out. Are you eating healthy at this meal? Do you have to ask? I'm the kind of person that eats healthy. So we have to put that in our brain. To what you alluded to earlier, yeah, when I left, I spent 12 years in the New York City in the television industry, major networks, NBC, PBS, BET. Started off with Nickelodeon. I was a young kid with long dreadlocks. I have a cliche story, small town kid, moved to New York with less than $1,000 in the bank account and broke into the highly competitive television industry to work with major networks on TV, all that kind of fun stuff. And after 12 years of that, there's two sides of the story, but one, I realized I wanted to shift. I wanted to change. I wanted to do something. I started falling in love with leadership and development, started falling in love with coaching, and I decided to pursue that. And most people thought I was crazy. Like, yo, what are you doing? You've worked this hard. You got this far in TV. At the time, I was working with NBC. Like, now you're going to leave to become a coach? Like the way they would say coach. It was like I was committing a crime to become a coach.
Yeah.
But what also was interesting in that moment, Sharon, was that I realized I got into TV for all the wrong reasons. Yes, I'm a great storyteller. Yes, I'm curious. I'm a great journalist. I enjoy all that comes with that. But when I go back, got into television, Sharon, because I was seeking validation. I wanted to be chose. So when I went to that network meeting or those auditions, and as you know, in TV, there's so much rejection. It was like this cycle I created for myself. And I was only validated when I got chosen by Network X, Network Y, Network Z. And I had done enough work by the time that I left the television industry behind that I had realized that the validation comes from within, not externally. It's like when you look at social media and so many people want to get verified, that blue check mark to show that they're verified. And, it took me a long time to realize, we're all verified the day that we are born, right? A blue check mark can't verify Sharon Jean Land. A blue check mark can't verify me. That's my God-given right. The day I was born, I was verified. So that's a lot, but those are some of the things that led to me leaving that job behind.
No, well, first of all, I think you know me. I love going deep. So I I love the deeper meaning and all of that. And yeah, we do. I think that that's part of one of our greatest issues, especially now, is that we have been kind of programmed or preened or groomed to want to seek external validation, right? It's to me, and we've had this conversation before, I don't think it's your fault, right? But once you're aware of it, it is your responsibility to actually make the change if it's not in alignment with who you are. So how did you, in that moment, right, when you were like, I am just in love with leadership coaching, how did you make that self-assessment and really have that awareness, or did that come after you decided to make the pivot?
I was so fortunate that my first year working with NBC, I was a business correspondent for a show, and I went all across the country and I profiled amazing CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, startup founders. And after the first season, I was doing good at that job. I'd been a journalist for a decent amount of time, trained to do so, et cetera. But it was my first time working with, business professionals like these folks that run multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar companies. And so I was really fortunate that the executive I worked with at NBC connected me with an executive coach that works with all these types of men and women, these leaders, to learn more about them, their psyche, how they show up, so I could be a better journalist, to ask better questions, to get more insight to how they work. Little did I know in that moment that led me on my journey to falling in love with personal development for myself. I mean, I went to this meeting with this woman, this amazing coach, Diana Chapman. She was recently featured on Tim Ferriss's podcast. And she's telling me about working with these executives. And I just found myself wanting to know more about her and her background and how she learned to do this work, et cetera. And that led me down a rabbit hole all of a sudden to attending my first personal development workshop, like in 2009 and 2010. And it led to certifications and becoming a coach and all this kind of fun stuff that then led to me 3 years later, doing the work that I do today. By the way, when I was in New York and I was leaving to go to trainings in places like Boulder, Colorado, and in places like Ojai in California, friends would always say, in New York, like, yo, what happens when you go to these personal development workshops? And I would say, I cry a lot. I cry a lot. Oh, which was accurate. I learned a lot, but I think that was accurate as well.
Yeah, so I'm sure they wanted to sign right up after that, right?
Yeah, I gotta say, like these personal development workshops, things I'd never done before. I'd seen therapists over the course of my life and my years of being on this planet, and I've loved therapy. I was fortunate. I still have a great therapist that I've worked with over the years in New York, and even one here in Los Angeles where I live now. And I just found something a little bit different about working with coaches. I think there's, of course, validity in both, but there's something just a little different in that coaching approach that activated something in me that challenged me, that got me more in tune with myself. Something you referenced earlier, that awareness, like, oh shit, excuse my language. Now I know. It's like it's amazing to walk through life, like kind of. I always equate it to this. I mentioned this in the book when when you're walking in the dark and you can't see anything, but then all of a sudden you see that small amount of light and things start to open up for you. Your iris opens up and all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of like the work we do with personal development. You no longer have excuses because you can now see the things you're about to kick or the things you're about to run into. You may not be able to see them perfectly, but you have this heightened awareness that otherwise was not there.
Hmm. Yeah. And then it's your choice. And then it becomes a choice, right?
Yeah, we always have this choice, and that's probably I think one of the most challenging things, that when you know better, like you know the right thing to do, but you still choose to do something different. I think for a lot of people, many of my clients who come to me, these are successful people. These are professionals, primarily women, but they happen to be stuck in their life or in their career. And what I find for these people, in my experience, is that many times there's a choice that needs to be made. Like there's a decision that they have to make that they've been unwilling to make for whatever reason. And I like to remind myself and to remind others that most times I've found to be true that your path forward won't be revealed until you make a decision about your current situation. So we can manifest all we want, we can make vision boards all we want, we can do 5-year plans all we want, and if you are unwilling to make a decision about the current situation you are in, all of that's going to be stymied. And I know that firsthand, and it's scary to make decisions, right? Because then who are we going to be when we make that decision about changing careers, when we make that decision about a shift needs to happen in this relationship, or maybe I'm going to have to go another direction. When we make that decision that we're going to establish boundaries with family members or friends that previously were crossed, when we make that decision, we're going to invest in ourselves in a way that we've never invested in ourselves before, et cetera. Then what? I mean, it's scary because to your point, as you mentioned earlier, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. However, the cool thing is that you are in the game.
I love that. You are in the game. We lose sight of that because we're so future oriented in our minds in that moment that it's hard to remember that you're still in the game. You're still
Yeah. Yeah, and I like to have fun with this stuff. And as a coach, I like to take many of my clients outside of the current situation that they're in. I think one of the best things that you can do as a coach is, I love saying, hey, if a dear friend of yours was in the exact situation that you're in right now, what would you tell them to do? And all of a sudden they can answer immediately. They can answer for their friend, but they can't answer for themselves. But to your point about being in the game, so many of us are on the sidelines. So many of us are wearing the practice jersey. If anyone's ever played sports before, we know there is a difference between the practice jersey you wear in practice and that game day jersey. Well, every single day in my book, it's game day. Yeah, we have to practice, we have to do the work, et cetera, but it's game day. And it's cliche to say, and I know this firsthand, many of us treat ourselves like secondary characters in our own lives, right? We have the opportunity to treat life like it's a movie, but we have to ensure that we are the lead character. We are the protagonist, but many times we observe from a distance as opposed to being fully present in that moment.
Oh man, you just hit a nerve with me, because that was really a big challenge for me, is being the lead character. And, you know, you had mentioned that a lot of your clients, a larger percentage of your clients are women or identify as women. And, you know, I think that that's a challenge. I think in general, that's a challenge, especially for a woman, right? Because we're kind of very much programmed to always be the caretaker, always, you know, put somebody else first, almost like a martyring, you know, for lack of a better word. And so that was one of my greatest journeys of unlearning in my own life. And I'm still learning it, you know, to how to actually be the lead character in your life. And I'm wondering if you found any common themes across the board as you were working through these particular issues or awarenesses. If there was if there was something that you saw.
I can speak personally for myself. One, to your point, right? Just first, as we think about women, and we talk about women just in the workforce. You know, we can look at research that's coming out of Gallup, and the numbers of burnout in corporate America right now, which are ridiculous. Like the percentage, well over 30+% of people over the course of a year that work for an organization are going to experience burnout. We can look at recent data from McKinsey, and you find that the majority of those folks are actually women. So exactly what you're saying is spot on. For myself, when it comes to becoming the lead character, when it comes to being in the game, when it comes to being fully seen, I mean, that's what we're talking about right now, being fully seen with all of our blemishes, all of our scars, all that kind of stuff. I had to learn. I think in many ways, I remind my clients this, and that is that our happiness and our success hurts no one. And I just want to let that just land for some people, because your success, whoever's listening right now, somebody needs to hear this. Your success, your happiness hurts absolutely no one. And I had to feel that deep in my heart, because I know for many years, as I experienced more success, I'm the first person in my family to get a college degree and to travel and do some of these amazing things. I can tell you firsthand that I felt so much guilt. I felt like I was doing something wrong. I felt like I was leaving people behind. And so I found myself every now and then, I'd make a lot of progress in life, and I'd get stopped. Then it would stop. Make a lot of progress, then it would stop. Make progress and stop. There's this consistent start, stop. Dating. I remember I would date some amazing women, and I'd be like, wow, you are the most amazing woman ever. You are honest, you have integrity, you care about me, you're truthful. I should run.
Yeah.
I should run before the rug gets pulled from underneath me. Holy smokes, this company is treating me really, really great. I think this is a place where I can really flex my muscles. I'm supported. You know what? Something's not right here. Things are too good. Let me get the hell out of this company, and let me just change things right now. And that's because I was not cool with being fully happy and successful and loved and being that lead character. And that took a lot of, deep work over the years that I still have to be committed to, that I still have to remind myself of who I am. I think one of the best things about being a parent, my wife and I have 5-year-old twins, is the things that, we get to instill in them. Yeah. The affirmations, the mantras, to remind them just of their divine right, things that, I didn't necessarily experience early on. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but our success, our happiness hinders no one.
Yeah. And I think that, boy, there's like a couple of things that I'm wanting to just jump right into. So the first thing is that just because that's the truth, that's the divine truth, right? And so basically we're speaking about your highest self and our highest state of being. And so for you, your success, whether it was going away and going to undergrad, going away and going to graduate school, getting caught in the current of a totally different life than maybe the majority of your family might have had exposure to, or had, I don't want to say didn't have the opportunity to, but they weren't in that, right? And so there is this element of feeling like you are leaving someone behind. And, so you yourself can get over that. But there's also this confirmation bias that happens, right? Where if there's even like a 1% within you that's feeling like, oh, but I am 99% sure of this, but there's this 1% that's still within me that is still feeling like maybe a little guilty, or maybe it is true, or whatever it might be. And then we have the family members, or, really good friends, or what have you, who then do give a little kickback to that. They actually do give a little bit of resistance, or, throw some shade, or whatever it might be, right? And so it's really important to realize that the rest is still unwritten within that relationship of your own personal success. So your success absolutely is going to affect other people. We don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a vacuum, right? And really, like you, like me, like most people, we want to be able to serve, right? So we know that our success isn't just going to be something where we're in a vacuum. It's going to be in connection with other people. It could just be very challenging with our early connections and some of our familial connections, or just real close connections, that sometimes they might give a little bit of resistance. And so I want to say this because you and I kind of know this, but at the same time, it's good for us to hear this. And at the same time, I think our community really needs to hear this, which is, just because someone is feeling uncomfortable with your success, that doesn't mean that your success is hurting them.
I absolutely love that, like 100%.
Yeah.
In fact, in many ways, it can be a catalyst
Yes.
for them. It can ignite them. And, I think the part that hit me, that kind of tripped me up early on, is that sometimes our success, our happiness, also it can threaten people, right? It can scare people, because you start hearing those comments, and we're afraid to go around people. We end up certain types of boundaries, and to your point, who knows? It also can positively influence them. And I've every now and then I have to ask myself, remind myself, what is and what isn't my responsibility. Like, where am I going to pour in my energy, and where am I not going to pour in my energy? Even if there are certain backhand comments or things that I've heard over the years, for me, the best thing I've learned in my life is the pause, and to get curious about that and wonder, right? And how I'm going to choose to react, how I'm going to choose to respond. And sometimes those funny comments, it's now the response is, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that. But I have control of where I'm going to take this conversation. I'm not going to let how you affect my emotions get the best of me. So I agree with you 100%. But more than anything, I want to remind all of us to surround ourselves with people who are excited to see us win.
Yes.
So I think one of the challenges I had as I reached certain, I hate to say the word levels, but different places in life that I never ventured to, that I wasn't comfortable with, my manual of life came to an end very early. Like, the manual that I was handed from my upbringing, if you want to call it a manual, it ended. And even when
last page.
Right. That's exactly it. Like, my manual probably ended right when I went to college. And even when I opened the book talking about kind of a bit of a crisis I had 5 years ago. And that's where my manual came to an end again, because I was married. I didn't know what a successful marriage looked like. Between my mom and dad, our six divorces. I had no idea what a marriage looked like. I had newborn twins. I didn't know what it meant to be a father, a husband, provider, all of that. So I ended up having a bit of a crisis. And that's when we have to find ourselves, remind ourselves not to do it alone. Unfortunately, we in times like those, when the manual comes to an end, and I did exactly this, gained 30 pounds of weight, had too many drinks, too many glasses of wine in the evening, binge watching Netflix, became a secret cigarette smoker. Those are whole other different stories, etc. But I isolated. And that right there that's the check engine light going off when you find
Yes.
yourself isolating. And so what I had to do is recommit to not doing it alone.
Mm.
And friends are great, family members are great, but guess what? Sometimes you have to write a check. Let me just remind people, sometimes you have to write a check or you have to give someone your credit card. And you got to work with a coach or a therapist one-on-one, or you got to join that mastermind, or you have to join that group coaching program, or you have to go to that retreat, or you have to reach out to someone that you know has been there, done that, and ask them for an hour of their time and take them out for a meal or something so you can learn from them. But unfortunately, and I know this firsthand, again, most times during those moments when our manual comes to an end, we isolate. And that's the absolute worst thing that we can do, because that can lead to self-sabotaging behavior. And no one who has accomplished anything of significance did it alone, and neither should we.
Yeah, I just want to let the words land there. Neither should we. And I think that when we're going through situations like you mentioned that you went through, I've been through many of those myself, that we really feel like we're the only one who feels the way we feel. And some of my experiences in my work is that people then start that hypervigilance and that hyper intellectualization of, well, so I'm going to further isolate, lock myself up in my cave and research this so I can figure out how to do this on my own. And we always find whatever answer we're looking for.
100%. A lot of people right now, let me tell you something. I had this on a podcast recently. The title is, I think it was called Figuring Things Out is Ruining Your Life.
Oh my God.
Because so much, hey, what's going on? You told me a couple years ago you wanted to leave that job that you really dislike. Still figuring things out. And you can go through all these different lists of things and people are figuring things out. Let me tell you something. This is breaking news. Thinking really hard will not solve anything. Thinking really hard will not solve anything. You'll laugh at this, Sharon, because you're familiar with it. Like even when I'm working with people, when we're having sessions, and there are times when I'm like, hey, stand up. Stand up right now, client X, client Y, client Z, move around, walk around as we talk, because I can feel you thinking so hard and trying to figure things out. And so, like you said, we'll reinforce certain things. So that's why it's so important to take action. That's why it's so important to get in those group coaching programs when we're hearing from others who are experiencing the exact same things. One of the best things, for example, about group coaching programs, and I do these, I know you do these, is that there are plenty of sessions I've been in as a participant, not as the coach leading it, though I lead those as well, where I didn't say a word throughout the whole hour. But just listening to other people and their story, I had breakthroughs.
Uh-huh.
I had breakthroughs. So don't forget our personal break. We can still have personal breakthroughs. They can come when we're helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like we forget that. Like it's me. No, listen, we can help someone else. So again, figuring things out can ruin your life if that's what you've been doing for a really, really long time. By the way, you know what else can ruin your life? Good situations. Let me give you an example of a good situation I write about in the book. I lived in New York City for a long time, and there's always that friend that lives in a neighborhood they don't necessarily like, but they have some great rent-controlled rent. And they're like, I don't really like this place. It's not where I really want to live, but it's a good situation. Good situations are ruining your life as well. If you really don't want to be there, that job, that apartment you live in, etc. But again, that takes us being willing to make some moves. But the cool thing is when you start making those moves, you start making those decisions, it builds up momentum, right? You can create momentum, and it doesn't have to be the biggest decision. In my experience, breakthroughs come from really, really small steps, but it builds up like compound interest. And when you have that group accountability around you, those people who are asking you about, hey, how did that conversation go with your boss? How many apartments did you look at last week? I know you mentioned you want to move to that new city. Did you buy that ticket to go explore last weekend? Amazing things can happen in a short amount of time.
Yeah, they can. And I was just talking to a friend who's really just, right now in the pinnacle of success in so many different ways. And I was just like, congratulations, this is so great. And they were like, I have been baby stepping it all the way. And I think that that's so important to know, because we look at people's success and we think, wow, they must have made this big leap. And sometimes we have to make a big leap. But most of the time, to your point earlier, we have to show up every single day. Our core values, our standards for our lives that we show up for every single day is what baby steps us to those big, amazing pinnacles of whatever we feel is successful. Success isn't necessarily always a monetary thing. Abundance isn't always a monetary thing. And I think that, at least for me, I know that I have been on all ends of the spectrum when it comes to, financial gains. So I understand how much really we measure those things based on how easy it was to get it.
I agree 100%. And as you were talking about those small things we have to do every single day, a dear friend of mine, he's an author, strategist, adventurer. His name is Bassam Tarazi. And he always likes to say, and this is going to seem counterintuitive to some people, he says, do less than you're capable of. Do less than you're capable of. Because we all know that, we know those people, it's a brand new year, right? I'm going to work out 7 days a week. Slow down. No, you're not. You're not going to work out 7 days a week. How about you give yourself permission to say, I'm going to work out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Start there, right? Or you know that person, I'm going to write for 3 hours every single day. No, you're not. I'm sorry, but you're not. How about you give yourself permission to say, you know what? I'm going to put a timer on every single day for 20 minutes to start getting after that book idea or that screenplay I've been thinking about for a long time. And something amazing happens when you start building like that. With that 20 minutes, before you know it, you've gotten to a good flow and you're like, oh, wow, I just wrote for 50 minutes. I just wrote for 45 minutes and amazing things happen. So I'm going to get up 2 hours earlier. No, you're not. Wake up 30 minutes earlier. So do less than you're capable of. And long term, it can lead to amazing results.
I love that. And so that takes us into something which is, it's a little bit of a stretch, but at the same time, I don't think that it is. I think that we're so used to being in this state, right? The state of existence. And so for me, one of my passions is really helping to talk to people about going from surviving to thriving and what that means, right? So from the bioscientific aspect, it's survival mode. We are in a complete nervous system activation, right? So when somebody says, oh, I'm going to get up 2 hours early, what is that doing to our bodies? What is that doing to our nervous systems? What is that actually creating? So there's a reason why when you say, no, you're not, right? There's a reason why. We know that maybe they'll do it once, maybe they'll do it twice, but it's not going to be sustainable success. So, I mean, what is your experience and what are your thoughts on the whole idea of like, for me, I feel like as not even just a culture here in the US, but just all across the globe, that we have really been shifting and we're really confronting a lot of things now when it comes to being in survival mode and a lot of the decisions that we've made and how that's affected our lives. So what are your thoughts on that? What's your experience in that?
Well, we can speak just specifically over the past 19 months. We definitely have been in survival mode. I think we've had a lot of panic. All you have to do is turn on the news, unfortunately, to have all those heightened, all those senses and different things heightened. So first, I'm going to go a few different directions on this. One, I want to remind people a couple of things. One, I want us to, so we can thrive, to set our own intentions for the day. I want you to set your intentions to remind yourself what's most important. Unfortunately, when we wake up, we're greeted with immediately with our phone. We'll go straight to email. We'll go straight to social media. We'll go straight to the news headlines. So we wake up immediately in a reactionary mindset. As I heard someone once say, your email inbox is not your to-do list. And that's typically what we end up responding to. So I want to remind all of us, first and foremost, before you do anything with your day, to say, hey, if nothing else gets done today, what are the three things that are most important about today? What a great, simple question. What are the three most important things about today? If nothing else gets done today, what most get done? You're focused already. So now when you do go to email, when you do go to social media, you can get karate chop those things that just aren't important to you in your life, because you've set the tone already for your day. You want to thrive? Turn off the news. I'm not the first person to say that, but as a guy that worked in the news business for many, many years, I want you to be intentional about where you seek your news out, and ensure, are you seeking out opinion or are you seeking out news? Those are two different things. Like fact-based journalism, versus opinion, two different things. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of integrity in the news business, so you never know which one you are getting. So my whole thing is limit your news intake. If you do choose to do that, make sure you're intentional about the sources. Make sure you're getting facts and you're getting the real stuff as opposed to opinion. So those things are critical. I would say a third thing is, of course, we have to give ourselves some grace. I know we hear that a lot, but we want to give ourselves some grace from a perspective of, I want us to treat life in many ways like it's a laboratory. I think we forget that we can treat this in many ways like it's an experiment, like it's a laboratory. One of the best things that happened to me before I finished my book, I was nearing the finish line of writing this book, and I was so stressed and overwhelmed. And I'm like, should I put this in there? There's a lot of material that didn't make it in. Is this any good? All this kind of stuff. And a coach that I work with, again, a person that I pay money to, for support, for guidance, for great questions, et cetera, to challenge me and to call me up. By the way, call me up, not call me out. He said something to me that just changed everything. He said, what if I told you this isn't going to be the only book that you write? What if I told you there are 10 more books, if not 20 more books inside of you? And I heard that, Sharon, and that just took all the pressure off, because all of a sudden it allowed me to approach my book as a scientist. I approached it as a laboratory to experiment and to have fun. But so many of us are approaching things just the finite, like it's the end game. This interaction is it. I mean, like, just think about when you get pissed at somebody when you're driving, when they cut you off. Like, are you treating it like a laboratory, or like, I mean, think about our reactions right there. Also, I think this is the last thing I'll say. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I'm going a little bit of everywhere, but going back to what we've experienced, so many of us, and I can speak for myself, are emotionally constipated.
Ooh.
We are emotionally constipated. What we have is a backlog of sadness that has not come out. I can guarantee you, someone listening to this right now, there are some tears that need to come out. Oh, I don't know why I cried during yoga class. I don't know why I cried during random cheesy. You're crying because you have a backlog of emotions, and they finally see an outlet to come out a little bit. We have a backlog of laughter, of joy that we have repressed because maybe we felt guilty to share that joy, to share that happiness. We have a backlog of anger, maybe something that happened to us or happened to someone else that we haven't got out. We haven't been able to get that carnal yell out into our pillow or in the woods, or punch that punching bag. We have so many backed up emotions, right, that haven't come out. And unfortunately, guess what? That's when they end up coming out at the wrong time. It's like we're like a Coke can being shaken up nonstop, and we're wearing all white. And it explodes at the exact wrong time because we're not getting it out. And how do I get it out? I get it out by working with professionals, right? I get it out with group coaching. I get it out from having a great community. I get it out by journaling. I get it out by questioning my thoughts. I get it out by giving myself permission to cry. I've had some real cries lately because I've had a very serious leg injury that changed so much for me. And I was I was resisting those tears, Sharon. Like, nope, not gonna get me. There's something in this for me. There's something, yeah, there is something in it for you, and it's okay to feel that emotion, to feel those tears of things not happening that you thought were going to happen, things getting canceled, rescheduled, etc. So to recap, let those emotions out. Treat life more so as a laboratory. You get to experiment and set those intentions for your day and read those things that are going to fill you, not deplete you.
Yes. Yeah. And to realize that that feeling of fulfillment when we notice that we keep going back to a well that is empty, that we can take a look at ourselves and make some decisions or some discernment as to why we keep going back to that well when it's empty, right? Because fulfillment, filling our cup, is something that I think that we're all now starting to understand. But the ways that we would seek that fulfillment, I think we're now being confronted with, and we're realizing that they weren't necessarily in alignment with our true health, right? So kind of circling back to your story that you shared before about that time in your life where you were starting to isolate and you were starting to maybe drink a little bit more than, was healthy for you, and smoking and all of that stuff. And so I'm sure in your mind, you're just like, well, for instance, being an ex-smoker myself, like the smoking was permission to take a break. Right?
Yeah, I know you. I'm sorry, I never thought about it like that. But whoa, yeah, it was permission to take a break. That, yeah, I can talk about the exhale, getting the smoke out of my lungs, but it was a break. By the way, I'm always jealous of smokers who get to go take those breaks that no one else does at the office. And briefly, I interrupted your thought process, but by the way, when I tell the story on stages and workshops, et cetera, about being a secret cigarette smoker, I no longer smoke now. I haven't had a cigarette in years. I can't tell you, Sharon, how many messages I get from people that are like, me too.
Yes. Yeah. I loved it when when we were in a Zoom chat together and you told the story about when you were smoking and you decided to go into an alleyway. And I thought, oh my gosh, that was me. It was.
Yeah.
I think we see ourselves in that. I don't know if we have a minute for you to share that, but it's just so incredible. It's confronting, but incredible.
Yeah, just briefly, when I was smoking cigarettes, I was hiding it from everyone. So I would wear this bright green gardening glove whenever I would smoke, and I had like a change of wardrobe, everything. And I wore that, and so I was smoking a cigarette one day, wearing this bright green gardening glove, and what I perceived to be was a homeless man came up to me and asked if he could borrow a cigarette. I was like, sure. We started talking. At some point, he noticed I had this bright green gardening glove on while I was smoking. He said, hey man, what's that about? And I was like, oh, my wife doesn't know that I smoke. I wear this so the stench of the smoke doesn't get on my hands. And the guy looked at me like I committed a crime, and he just felt sorry for me. And he said some words that really changed things for me, that got me on my journey. He says, hey man, you got to figure that out. There's an expletive in there. You got to figure that out. And boom, did that really hit me. And that just brings me, frankly, to a point, and I think we're winding down here, but it brings me to a point of, we all know about those people, Sharon. I know you've had one of these moments yourself, but we have people, we know those people have had those moments, those life-altering events. They have a bad health diagnosis, end up in the hospital. That person that gets a DUI, that person that gets served divorce papers, that person that loses their job for whatever reason, right? And then only after that life-altering event do we begin to change things. My call to action for all of us is not to wait for that life-altering event and to remind people that you, yes, the person listening right now, that you are the life-altering event that you've been waiting for. Don't wait for that bad health diagnosis. Don't wait for those divorce papers. Just don't wait. You are the life-altering event. I firmly believe if there's this is going to be so basic, but if I have a purpose on this planet, it's to remind people that they have a say in their life. Like that you have a say in this thing called your life, going back to being in the game as opposed to on the sidelines. And that's what brings me joy. And I have to, by the way, remind myself of that every single day, because we talk so much about the word commitment. You got to commit. You got to commit. But what people don't realize, and what I have to remember, is that commitment isn't a one-time thing. We have to recommit every single day to what's most important. I was talking to myself, by the way, just kidding.
Yeah. I know, as you're saying that, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make sure that I am doing that. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why when we first connected and we interacted, I said, oh, okay, this is someone who I want to surround myself with and who I feel like on some level I want to connect with more, because I love your real plain but very, very clear way of going like this and really having somebody take a look at themselves, and also giving the grace to say, but there's also another piece that you're just not seeing, which is you're incredible, right?
Yeah.
It was your divine birthright. And I love that you've mentioned the divine several times in the universe, because I think that that's something that is so important for us to realize, because a lot of these things that you're mentioning are just all from our higher mind, right? So when we come and rise into our higher mind, then we're not reacting anymore, we're responding. Right. And then we get to actually continue to say, I choose to be a player in this life. And I also every day get to choose how I want to show up as that lead person in my life. And so I've so thoroughly enjoyed all of our interactions up until this point, because you really just helped to remind me of me, which has been wonderful. And it's so valuable and very memorable. But I think that it's so important for everybody who's listening today to really take into consideration getting your book. It is such a great read because it's a read, but at the same time, it's like a workbook. So you're creating a legacy of your own thoughts of where you were in the moment when you were reading the book. And there were some moments where I laughed, literally laughed out loud. And there were some moments when I really cried because I was greeting myself in your words, and it was really powerful, really, really powerful.
I really appreciate that. The feedback from the book has been just so positive, and it's humbling in many ways. And hey, everything in there is tried and true. I do it. I've done it with clients over the years. I've done it in workshops. It's not some random ad hoc. So I appreciate your kind words.
Well, I wouldn't say if I would not say them if I didn't mean them, that's for sure. But I thank you so much for coming today and joining us. And I hope that you'll consider coming back again and sharing more about, oh my gosh, you have scads of stories, which I love every single one of them. And to let us know how you're doing with your healing journey. But if you had anything that you wanted to say as parting words before we left today, that would be great.
Parting words before we leave. Let's see what comes through me right now. Of course, I want to remind people that they have a say in their life. I want to be plain and direct to folks and remind them that no one owes them anything, but they owe themselves everything. I want to remind people that no matter where they stand today, the story isn't over yet. And I want to remind people that these are all reminders, by the way. We know this internally, that when you believe, first part, believe, when you believe and work like the best is ahead, things begin to change for the better in your life. Once again, when you believe and work like the best is ahead, things begin to change for the better. So that's what I would like to leave folks with.
Oh, I think that that's a wonderful, wonderful gift. And if people only heard those things, I think that that will make a huge difference in their lives. So thank you so much. You're just so profoundly impactful. And I wish you so much success, continued success with your book. And I thank you again for coming to join us. And until the next time, peace, love, and we'll be seeing you soon.